Ray, as we look into the business impact of consolidation and especially related to TCO, ROI, let me go one step back and ask you, what are some of the business and technical challenges associated with a disparate HCM or other system landscape?
Well, let's start by how we got here. And we got here because we needed best of breed systems. When the market was starting out, there were all these cool areas that are on the edges of core HCM and HR. And, everybody was trying to get to functionality. But then what we realized over time is it's really hard to manage all these different best of breed systems. And one of the rules in enterprise software is suites always win. And that's why smart leaders are basically reducing these number of systems. And so what does that mean? Every time you upgrade, you got to integrate, right? You've got to make sure the integrations are working. You got to make sure things are compatible. You're doing the testing. How many of these systems do you want to do that with? Some of you, and you know who you are, some of you have 47 other systems you're connecting to your core. How about get that down to 20 or maybe 10 or maybe 5? And that's what a lot of organizations are trying to do because it's a really, really hard thing to do. And that's not just the training. That's not just the upgrade. That's not just all the work that you have to do sometimes to make UX work in your favor. It's very difficult to manage that. Even the vendor relationships. Some of you folks are talking to 47 salespeople at the same time. That is just unfathomable given how much and how busy everybody is today. So where you can find places to do that consolidation, definitely start there because you're going to see a lot of productivity savings. And of course, there's cost savings. Now you might miss some functionality, but I would say in most cases, you can build that or you can configure that functionality with the systems that you have. So it's definitely worth your time to start there.
First of all, I would say that sometimes it's not even 45, it can be 145. What should organizations look for in vendors as they try to do all this consolidation you just described?
Well, the first part you want to look for is a vendor that's going to be around. In the middle of the HR tech boom, we had a lot of fly-by-night startups. Now we know who some of the startups are that are surviving, but the main thing is you want to have anchors. You want organizations that you can talk to. And part of being an enterprise class company is they have a roadmap. They can commit to the roadmap. They have a history of delivering. They've got a great track record. There's a beautiful ecosystem where you actually have partners and integrators and other customers you can talk to. You've got strong customer boards and advisory boards where you actually have some input. So you're going to have of the 45 or maybe the 145 that you're talking about, John, I'd say that in that list, there's probably about 10 to 15 vendors that have that capability. And you want to choose one or two of them as your anchors and then see what you can do with the other ones. And you're going to know very quickly the partnership ecosystem usually ties back to, if you have 45, probably about 25 of those vendors. And those ecosystems will drive who you work with because that means there's relationships, there's integration roadmaps, people are cooperating. The system integrators are familiar with those capabilities. And then, of course, if there's just that one special software company that you love, that's, a best of breed, you'll be able to manage them. But 45, I thought was crazy. John, 145 is ridiculous.
Yeah, well, it can happen, particularly in large organizations. So now looking at the business case of all this, and particularly as organizations put the numbers together, what kind of ROI should they expect to realize by consolidation? Where they can find the ROI? What exactly this ROI would look like?
Yeah, so usually what happens in the first piece is if you go from 45 vendors to 10, you definitely are reducing the licensing costs. And that's what you're going to see as a drop in the license costs. And that means every year you free up operational expense. And that OpEx is what pays for, the monthly cost per user. The second piece is not as apparent, but it becomes very apparent quickly, is you also lower your integration costs. And that's the piece we talked about, whether it's training, whether it's education, whether it's the upgrades, whether it's the refresh cycles that you have to get to. And that'll hit you probably about 3 to 6 months afterwards. And then, of course, we're going to see efficiency that actually happens. And that's when the users are able to access the information and insight directly. They can see everything in one plane. They can have more of their capabilities without having to log in and log out of systems. That helps a lot. I don't think you guys are doing swivel chair integration out there. I hope not, where you're entering data in one spot, and going over and then enter data somewhere else. But if you are doing that, you're definitely gonna get some savings there as well. And then the other piece that what we think is really important is the fact that having the data and having that information and insight in one place allows you to make better business decisions. You're going to see that efficiency. It allows you to actually coordinate better. And I think that's been one of the big challenges when you're running 45 or 145 different systems at the same time. It's very hard to get all the information and insight into one place. You end up having to do something to compensate for each one of those 45 or 145 apps.